There is a kind of disappearance that is worse than death. Death leaves a body. Death leaves a grave. Death leaves a family with something to hold on to, a date, a place, a name carved into stone. But there is another kind of disappearance, one that leaves nothing. No body, no grave, no explanation, just silence where a person used to be. And in the final months of World War II, 120 American soldiers experienced exactly that kind of disappearance, not by accident, not by enemy fire, but by order. Welcome to Relic Remnants, where the stories history buried don't stay buried forever. To understand what happened to these men, you have to understand what Europe looked like in early 1945. The war was not over, but everyone knew it was ending. Hitler's forces were collapsing on two fronts. Allied armies were pushing east through Germany, while Soviet forces were grinding west from the other direction. And in that chaos, in that gap between victory and peace, some of the most dangerous and secretive operations of the entire war were taking place. Because war ending doesn't mean war stopping. It means the rules change. It means powerful people start making decisions about what the future will look like, and, more importantly, what the future will never know about. In the forests along the eastern edge of the Allied advance, a small reconnaissance unit had been operating in near total secrecy for almost 8 months. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were hand-selected men with language skills, survival training, and the kind of psychological temperament that allowed them to work alone, deep behind lines, without support. About 120 of them in total, broken into small teams, moving constantly, communicating only by coded radio transmission. Their commanding officer reported directly to a single general. Their mission files were classified at the highest level. Even most of the soldiers themselves didn't know the full picture of what they were doing or why. They knew their individual assignments. They knew their extraction points. They knew their radio schedules. That was all they were supposed to know. And for 8 months, it worked. Then one morning, in late April 1945, the radio went silent. The general received no warning, no final transmission, no distress signal, just silence where there had always been a voice. He waited 24 hours, assuming equipment failure. Then 48. On the third day, he sent a search team to the last known coordinates of the unit's central camp. What they found has been described in only one surviving document, a handwritten field report that was later classified and has only been partially released to the public even today. The camp was intact, tents still standing, a cooking fire that had burned down to cold ash, tin cups still on the makeshift table, rifles military issue, fully loaded stacked neatly against a tree as if the men had simply stepped away for a moment and planned to return. But there were no men. No bodies, no signs of struggle. No tracks leading out of the camp in any direction that the search team could follow with confidence. The ground was hard. It had not rained in days. 120 men had been there. And then they were not. The general filed his report. Within 72 hours, that report was pulled from the standard filing system and marked classified. The unit was officially listed as dissolved due to operational circumstances, a bureaucratic phrase that meant nothing and was designed to mean nothing. A form letter was sent to the families of each soldier. Missing in action. No further details available. We are sorry for your uncertainty. That phrase, your uncertainty, was chosen deliberately. Not your loss, not your grief, your uncertainty. Because uncertainty can be managed. Uncertainty doesn't demand answers the way loss does. The families did demand answers, of course, for years. For decades, they wrote letters to the Department of Defense. They contacted their senators. They hired lawyers. They formed a small informal network. Mothers, wives, siblings who shared information and frustration across kitchen tables and handwritten correspondence for 30 years before the internet existed to connect them faster. And every time, they were told the same thing. No information available. Records incomplete. We understand your frustration, and we are sorry for your uncertainty. Some of them died, still waiting. Others kept going. 40 years after the soldiers vanished. A retired military archivist named Gerald Hooper was doing routine work at the National Records Center in Maryland, cataloging old files, cross-referencing documents that had been declassified in batches over the previous decade. Unremarkable work for an unremarkable Tuesday. Then he pulled a folder with no title, just a case number. Inside were 3 things: a handwritten list of 120 names, a set of geographic coordinates deep inside what had been Soviet-controlled territory in 1945, and a single handwritten note, unsigned, that read, "Do not pursue. Order stands." Hooper photographed everything before logging the folder. He told colleagues later that something felt wrong the moment he read the note. Not dramatic, he said, just wrong. Like finding a door in a building that shouldn't have a door. He went home that night and started researching the names. What he found over the following weeks stopped him completely. None of these men had death certificates. None had pension records showing payments to surviving family members after an official death determination. None had grave registrations anywhere in the European theater or back home. But none of them had ever been officially declared dead either. They existed in a strange bureaucratic middle space, acknowledged as having existed, refused to be accounted for. Hooper reached out to 3 of the surviving family members he managed to locate. An elderly woman in Ohio whose brother had been on the list. A man in Pennsylvania whose father had never come home. A woman in Georgia who had been 6 years old when her uncle disappeared and was now in her late 40s. All 3 of them wept when he called. Not because they had given up hope, but because, for the first time in 40 years, someone from inside the system was calling them. Someone who had found something. So what actually happened to these men? Military historians and investigative journalists who have worked this case over the past 2 decades have put forward several theories, and none of them are comfortable. The first theory is the prisoner exchange theory. In the final weeks of the war, back-channel negotiations between Allied commanders and Soviet officers were happening at multiple levels simultaneously. Some of these negotiations were authorized, some were not. There is documented evidence released through Freedom of Information requests in the 1990s that at least 2 unauthorized exchanges of high-value individuals took place along the Eastern Front in April and May 1945. The theory suggests this reconnaissance unit witnessed one of those exchanges, and that someone decided witnesses were a problem. The second theory is darker. It involves not what the soldiers saw, but what they found. Some researchers believe the unit had located and secured a cache of documents, Nazi records, of a kind that certain powerful people on the Allied side had very strong reasons to want destroyed rather than submitted as war evidence. The soldiers, the theory goes, became inconvenient the moment they reported what they had found. The third theory, and the one that several family advocates have pushed hardest, is the simplest. These men were transferred, not killed, not disappeared into a void, moved given new identities, embedded into post-war intelligence operations that required them to vanish from their old lives permanently. The Cold War was already beginning before World War II officially ended. Men with their particular skill sets were valuable. Men who were already officially listed as missing were even more valuable. They could be deployed without paperwork, without accountability, without anyone asking where they were. In 2003, a researcher named Helena Marsh was following the third theory through small villages in rural Austria. She had a list of names and approximate ages. She was looking for American men who had settled in Europe after the war with no clear paper trail. In a village outside Graz, a local historian mentioned an old man, English-speaking, American accent. No records anyone had ever been able to find. Had lived quietly in the village since the late 1940s, never talked about his past, never received mail from America, never tried to contact anyone from a life before. Marsh found him. He was in his late 80s. She showed him a photograph of the unit taken before their deployment. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her, and he started to cry quietly. With the particular exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something for 50 years and is too tired to pretend anymore. He wouldn't give his name. He asked her to leave. She came back the next morning. He was gone. The landlord said he had left before dawn with a single bag. He never returned to the village. Helena Marsh never found him again. The folder Gerald Hooper discovered has since been reclassified. His photographs, the only remaining public copies of its contents, are held in a private archive at a university he asked not to be named publicly. They are available to credentialed researchers who know exactly what to request and exactly how to ask for it. 120 men. Ordered to disappear. Their families spent decades being told there was no information. There was information. It was in a folder with no name, in a building full of people whose job was to make sure no one ever asked the right question. And the most haunting part of all of this, the part that stays with you when you close the file and turn off the light, is that it worked. For 40 years, it worked completely. And we still don't know the full truth today. If you think history is always eventually uncovered, think again. Some of it stays buried. Some doors stay closed. Some orders stand. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Relic Remnants. There are hundreds more like it, classified, forgotten, deliberately erased, and we are not done digging.